100 years ago, a man quits his job and jumps on trains. He's called a hobo. Now, he's called a YouTube star. In the Hangar. Welcome to In the Hangar. I'm Dan Milliken.
And I'm Christy Wong. Today's episode is brought to you by our awesome sponsors, Colton Mortgage and FlyingEyes Optics. And now that you've officially offended our guest today, why don't you go ahead and introduce him?
Okay, so not a hobo, but certainly an a YouTube star is Noel Phillips. Noel, you flew all the way from the UK. And boy, your arm's tight. No, I'm not going to do that. But welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And I do feel a bit like a hobo with the beard, so especially after jumping off all those planes.
Well, if you pet Chewy enough here, you'll get even more hair. So, well, welcome. And let's find out a little bit more about you, what you were doing, and why you quit your job to become a hobo.
Absolutely. I started my YouTube channel in 2009, and at the time I was working in IT, so I went into work every day and I helped people fix their computers and things, and did that for many, many years while in the background just exploring my passion for aviation. And over time started to grow a bit of a following, and people for some reason enjoyed watching me do what I do and travel around the world on aeroplanes. And
wait, so were you a pilot at this point?
Well, that's a long story.
So. Oh, here we go. Okay.
So I got my private pilot's license in 2002.
So long before.
Before I started doing this. And I'd been a massive aviation fan for ages, and decided when I got my first full-time job, I was going to go out and get my private pilot's license, and it was great. And I got to fly all around and enjoy flying little Cessna 152s and things. And then life happened, and I ended up buying a house and meeting my wife, and we bought a house together. And all of a sudden, disappearing off to fly for a couple of hours, it becomes kind of quite an expensive hobby. And
I understand.
Especially when you don't get paid for it, right? So I ended up having to quit flying, and it's gnawed away at me for many, many years. As you know, once you've kind of got that bug for flying, it doesn't go away. And for so many years, I just kind of wished I could be up there. I'd look out and see Cessnas and Pipers flying over the house and thinking, I wish I could be back flying a plane again. And it took until last year or the year before when COVID happened, and everybody had to sort of reassess what they were doing with their lives. And that was the moment I thought to myself, well, I am now quite successful at what I'm doing. I've got the time to be able to do this on the side. Travel is potentially becoming a bit of an issue as it was back then. Let's see if I can get the old pilot's license back. I called up the local school, and they said, to my absolute surprise, they were like 3-4 hours maybe, and you can be back flying. I was like, oh, after 20 years? Yeah, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
So,
famous last words. That's how they get you.
Exactly. Yeah, that's how they get you back in, isn't it?
The first hit is free.
Yeah. What do you think I do with my Discovery flights?
Right.
So I rock up to this little airfield, and this guy says, right, let's go flying. And I got in, and he's like, right, off we go. I was like, what, me? And he's like, yeah. And just like riding a bike, it was the weirdest thing. I got in, and instantly my head was in the whole, right, we do these checklists, and this is what you have to do. And all those acronyms that I remembered from 20 years ago, they just suddenly came back. So I'm flying, and I take off, and we do steep turns and stalls and things. And he's like, you've not forgotten any of this. And it was the weirdest feeling, because in my head, I hadn't flown a plane in 20 years, and I'd forgotten everything there was to know about it. And suddenly I was flying again, and 3-4 hours later, he did a check ride with me, and he's like, fine, you signed off. There's your license back. And I'm current again. I'm like, what? And I think it helped after that point as well, because I was in the frame of mind now that I want to start continuing to progress with this. So I went ahead and got my night rating, and I got my restricted instrument rating, which is a thing we have back in the UK. And
Yeah, so the UK, you have to do a night rating. It's
Yes.
not just part of your certificate, it's actually a rating that you get.
Absolutely, because
Wow.
for the most part, we don't get a lot of night when the weather's good in the UK. The night,
You don't have night in the
We,
UK.
well, no, yeah, that's the fact
How
that
does
everybody
that
needs to
work?
know.
Like Alaska, during the
But
summer.
only half the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, in the summer when the weather's good, it gets dark at 9 o'clock at night, sometimes in the middle of summer. And then when the weather's terrible in the winter, it's dark at 3 o'clock. So we can only kind of do night training for half the year, effectively. So I got my night rating to add that on to my basic PBL. And I did my restricted instrument as well, which is...
Restricted
Which is
Okay,
something
so
else
let's
that
talk
we
about
have.
what a restricted. Are you only allowed to do like VOR approaches? Like what is?
So we can do everything that a normal IR rated pilot can do, with the exception of flying in Class Alpha airspace, and we can only use our license in the UK. So I can't fly to France, for example, and then do an instrument approach, or
here
or
in the
here
US?
even, yeah. So I have my piggyback FAA license, but I can't use my restricted instrument from the UK over here. I need to do a full IR to get that, which for most people, it's kind of who fly in the UK and just want to be able to get out of the crap when they fly and find themselves like heading into IMC and stuff. It's great because it really allows you to be able to do that.
Okay, so I've got a question about that. So what would the difference in training be for the restricted instrument rating versus like your full IFR?
So the restricted is a lot less. I had to do 15 hours. That was all it was.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And even then, it's quite kind of, it's weird because the UK have a lot of outdated things that we do as part of that. So we don't do RNAV approaches as part of that, for example.
No
you'd be
RNAV.
like- Which, yeah, these days everybody does RNAV, but no, in the CAA land, the IRR doesn't have RNAV. And
So you do a lot of NDBs.
so we do NDB approaches.
Oh,
We do-
I was
we do-
joking.
No, we do. Indeed, do
So,
NDB
we sold
approaches.
all of ours and sent them to the UK?
Yeah.
Perfect. I think that's what happened.
So we do NDB approaches, we do VOR approaches, we do ILS approaches as
I
well.
wasn't wrong when I said VOR.
We're phasing out VOR.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, you can have all our used ones, so you
Yeah.
really get a lot of VOR
Yeah.
now.
And you know what's crazy? Isn't the UK known for having terrible weather?
It is.
See,
Absolutely,
so you
yeah.
would
If
think
you
that
need
they'd want more training for instruments, but no, 15 hours, you're good.
Absolutely. I mean, they're starting to bring in RNAV approaches at a lot of the airfields, even the smaller ones like Northampton, Sywell. It's like a little grass airfield about an hour from me. And they have the Helimed helicopters based there, so they've just put in an RNAV approach there. My airfield I fly from, we get a lot of private jets flying in there, but we don't have any instrument approaches at all there.
Wow.
It's just visual only. So
One day you'll have an ILS. It'll
Yeah.
be neat.
one day we will.
It'll be
yes.
revolutionary.
Yes.
Okay, well, which really then, other than instruments, what is the difference between flying in the UK versus the US?
I think the biggest thing, I mean, I haven't flown as much in the US, obviously, as I have in the UK. And in my limited experience, the thing I love about flying over here is the openness of everything. Like, I could just take off and head to an airport and just land somewhere.
And
And
I
not
do that
have to-
sometimes.
Yeah, and not have to call up for permission to do so.
Oh, my.
Or, yeah, you don't. So in the UK, if you want to fly to any airfield, pretty much you've got to get permission before you fly. You've got to call them and say, right, I want to fly in. Here's my ETA. Here's everything. And then you pay your landing fee, which is something else that we have to deal with. So,
Gross.
yeah, whereas here, you just... The fact you can just hop in a plane and just, we're going to head off to this airport today and just
I think
call
that's
up.
something we take for granted, honestly, because we just don't realize what it's like in other countries. But we've done other episodes like that.
Yeah, we've had Martin Polly on, and Martin talks about Europe being, incredibly stifling as far as general aviation.
Restrictive.
Is there any hope for the future of being able to lift some of these crazy restrictions and costs?
I think that they are working on a lot of it, and it's been heavily criticised the way that things are there. We kind of get used to it. I don't think it's as bad as necessarily an American voice would think it would be. It's to us, it's just normal, right? And
Oh, no, it sounds terrible.
And yeah, exactly.
Like, I want to be able to jump in my airport, fly to Bridgeport, go have lunch, and I want
without having to tell everybody.
Exactly. No.
And it's not as bad as all that. That's not the bar that we want to shoot for.
No.
Absolutely,
No.
no, and I get that. From my point of view, it's just that's kind of how it is. And if I want to go somewhere, I know I've got to give them a call. Or these days, they're getting a bit more up to date. And since COVID, particularly, there's been a lot of online PPR that we can do now. So, which makes it a little bit easier because I just have to load up the iPad. And
So they don't have RNAV, but they're starting to do online
So they're only like 30 years behind. That's cool.
Not bad.
Okay, so going back then, you got your recency and your currency and everything back. So you're like, awesome, I'm going to quit my job and go flying.
Well, actually, it's my other YouTube channel that's taken me to go full time. So my Noel Phillips channel, which is where I started, and that originated as me being one of these YouTubers who just kind of goes around and flies and makes reviews of different airlines. Oh, you get a full-size can of Coke on this airline, and you get whatever. And over time, I kind of adapted that approach because everybody was doing that, and I figured that what I wanted to do was do the things that other people maybe wouldn't feel comfortable doing.
Such as what? Give me an example.
Such as heading to Russia and flying on Soviet jets around little towns in Russia and having to load your own baggage onto the plane because they don't have baggage handlers, so you do it all yourself and things like that. And that's the sort of experience. I can do that now. I do this as my job now, so I can say, right, I'm off to Russia for 3 weeks and we'll go and
What possessed you? Like, what possessed you to like, you know what? I'm going to go do this. Because, going and flying a couple hours, in a Cessna or whatever, it's like, that's one thing.
Aeroflot and loading your own baggage is another.
Exactly.
The thing is, from my point of view, initially I've always had a fascination with Soviet aviation and the rarer side of aviation. I grew up seeing pictures of exotic planes like Yak 40s and things, or seeing planes approaching little dirt strips in Africa, thinking that is so cool. I'd love to go and actually see that for myself and see what it's like. And for a long time, there was that kind of uncertainty about it with the whole safety aspect of it. You're like, am I literally putting myself in harm's way to do this? And the first time I flew on a Soviet airliner, it was on a Tu-154 from Belarus, and I felt a bit nervous, I have to say, and I was like, "This is the sort of thing."
I've seen the Russian dash cam.
Buckle your seatbelt if you want to or don't.
Yeah.
No matter.
Doesn't matter. And so, and in my mind is whenever you see a plane crash in the news, a lot of the time it's in these smaller, like ex-Soviet countries or something.
The ones you're flying through, right?
The ones that I'm flying through, exactly. And so there was that intrepidation the first time, and then you sort of get into the mindset of, nobody on this plane wants anything to happen, least of all the pilots that are flying the thing. And you start to realise that the more I fly on these airlines, they're flying day in, day out across these really sparse pieces of land and into some really challenging airports. And the fact is that you very rarely, even now, hear about things going wrong with them.
And they're doing it without RNAV.
Exactly.
Right.
How do they do it?
NDB.
Yeah.
Okay, so your traveling channel. Let's talk about that for a minute. It really blew up. It's really done good. It's enabled you to chuck the whole IT thing and go have steak from Manchester to Houston. What out of all those crazy videos of Russia and everything else, what was your favorite best trip ever?
I think the best trip, the most rewarding trip that I ever did was right here in the USA, actually. And I like to fly on a lot of the essential air service routes that you guys have here because it lets me get off the beaten track and visit all these little towns that you probably wouldn't have heard of. And I flew last year from Denver on an airline called Denver Air Connection on the Metro. And it was to a town in Nebraska called Alliance, Nebraska, which is in the Nebraska Panhandle, as remote as it gets, flat and nothing there. I decided to fly in January.
There is something there. It's called snow, but yeah.
And ice.
And ice.
Cold.
And after 2 weeks in Mexico, which we had to do because of COVID back then, so I'm there in a T-shirt and like light jacket and everything, and then I walk out and it's like below freezing and like blizzard conditions. Anyway, I fly on this metro up to Alliance, and you can see through the flight deck as you're coming into land. There is just white. There is nothing but white outside the windows. You're like, how on earth are they picking out this runway in in this environment? And we landed, and he goes, "Oh, it was just aimed between the lights, and that's kind of all you can do." I was like, brilliant. And I get off the plane, and that's the point where I realised that in towns like Alliance, Nebraska, you don't get Uber and taxis and things like that. And I hadn't thought about any of this. I was just like, let's just go and see what it's like, have a laugh. And there was literally nothing. And this guy who'd been on the plane with me was like, do you want a lift into town or anything? I was like, that'd be amazing if you could give me a lift to my hotel, so at least I can kind of get where I need to be. So this guy turned out, and over the course of the few days I was there, him and his family essentially took me under their wing.
Oh, wow.
And they were driving me around. I got a tour from his dad of the whole of Alliance, and they took me out to see all of the oil wells and the grain silos that they were really proud of there. And
this is your best trip?
This was incredible. But the thing is, it was the fact that I'd gone to this place where I knew nobody, to the tiniest town in the middle of rural America in the middle of winter. And I get there, and this family are just like friends. And they took me to the bar and had a drink, and I went to see Carhenge, which is, if you've not seen it, by the way, it's amazing. It's like Stonehenge, but made out of cars.
Yes.
It's brilliant. And effectively, they just took me in as one of their own, and the whole community sort of rallied around to get me wherever I wanted to go.
We've got this Englishman here.
Yeah, exactly. And like the funniest moment of that trip was when I met Harvey, who was the older guy who's like the uncle in the family. It's
Uncle
like,
Harvey,
yeah, Uncle Harvey. And he said, "Oh, you're from England?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, do you know Bob and Carol? It's like, who's Bob and Carol? He goes, "Oh, they live in London. Do you not know them?" I was like, "No."
That is so awesome.
And that's become like,
know them.
just incredible. I mean, the most lovely people.
It's like the small town think,
Oh,
you know.
yeah, and
I know Bob and Carol in town here, yes,
Yeah,
you know.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's fun.
And, you know, and asking me, like, how do they farm in England? How does the grain work? And what do they use for grain stock? I'm like, I have no idea.
Wow.
Like, I'm not the person you ask. But this is the community where everybody knows everything about farming, right? So they just, but that trip, honestly, it was only a small town America trip. And ordinarily it would have just been yet another flight that I'd done. But these people really just touched me somewhere, and it was incredible.
Okay, so conversely, I want to know about your worst trip.
My worst trip, probably it was a flight I did in Mexico, and I found an airline somehow. I don't know how I found them, but they operated originally 3 Cessna Caravans, but they crashed one, so they only had 2, and they flew.
Well, that's only 1 out of 3.
They've got 2
You
to keep
have a
going.
66% chance at
Yeah.
this point.
There we go.
Okay.
So I fly into Sonora in sort of northwestern Mexico, not really thinking that this isn't the sort of place you should just rock up and just drive a car around and drive
you don't
out
have
into
cartels
the
or
desert.
anything to deal with.
Nothing like that to worry
No,
about at
no,
all.
Not at all.
So I got there in the morning and to take this flight, and I figured I've got a few hours, so I rented a car for a day, and I just drove off into the Sonora Desert, as you do. And
And you never came back.
and I did come back, but only after I'd been followed by this armoured pickup truck with all these guys with guns in the back that just pulled out on me and just started following me through this remote road. I was like, I'm never getting out of here alive.
Oh, my God.
Somehow I made it back to the airport, and I got to this, the plane landed, to take me on my little trip, and it was a Cessna Caravan. And it turns out that actually it probably would have been safer just driving in Sonora, because this Cessna Caravan turned up. This is another one that had crashed, but they'd repaired it. This one.
Oh, good.
So we were all right. It was flying
fixed.
now, and it had made it into the airport. So like, it's going to take me out.
It's a good sign.
So I get into the plane, and I'm sat right behind where the first officer would usually sit, so at the front. And he gets in the plane, the pilot gets in, and I just instantly, as a pilot, my mind goes to, right, what's not working here, like on the flight deck? And there were instruments out, and there was no radio. The radio was in op, so he'd got the microphone that he was talking. He'd got it all coming through the speakers and everything, which was cool for an aviation geek. I could listen to him talking to ATC, and then you take off, and then you realise that the autopilot's in op as well, so he's hand flying it across the the Gulf.
And he's having to set the
over to-
NDB.
And now, well, I don't know what he was doing apart from he's on his phone. He's WhatsApping on his phone.
He's looking at-
and he's
He's WhatsApping.
Yeah, exactly.
which I thought was brilliant. So he's like WhatsApping on his phone. Every time he looks down to his phone, the aircraft starts sort of doing this, and I'm like, just like grab the
Would you like me to
controls.
fly this for a while?
Oh my goodness.
And then he puts his headphones in and he loads up Spotify and he starts listening to Spotify and I'm like, this is just like... And it was... Every time he looked at his phone, the aircraft just started just dropping and I could see on the GPS the route and we were like just turning off the route and then we were flying back again and we were going back up and it was horrendous. And then we've got instruments weren't working, so they'd got the VOR on the... First officer's side was just spinning round in circles, like the HSI was just going round, and I'm like, I just need to get off this thing. And it's the only time in over 800 flights I've done, this is the only time that I just wanted to get off that thing and never get back on it.
What was the name of this airline?
They were called Aero Guerrero. Aero Guerrero. And as I called them, Aero Guerrero from the land of sombrero. And, but yeah, I honestly... I never wanted to get back on that plane again, and yeah, and there we go. So it's the first and only time that I've said that.
Okay, awesome.
Something, you've got quite a few followers, something your followers don't know about you.
See, I'm quite open. This is a really difficult question because I tend to not want to hold anything back from anybody on my channel with what I do, and I suppose the one thing I can think of is that myself and my wife are massive country music fans, which
Oh, no.
which for somebody
country?
from Russia.
Oh, okay. Russia, of course. That makes sense.
But for somebody from the UK, like a lot of over here, it's not a thing. People love all sorts over here, but in the UK, it's quite a off. Not many people are into. We don't get country music over in the UK.
Oh, really?
I think the last country music we had was Kenny Loggins or something. It was like that's as kind of as. But yeah, so we've travelled all over to see our favourite stars all over
nice.
the world. We've been to Vegas and to the ACMs in Vegas, and we've travelled across Europe to follow these random country singers from across the pond and find their one concert that they do over in Europe, like once a year. And yeah, so.
Well, that's nice. Okay, I just have to point this out. I noticed that you've got a Cherokee on your shirt.
I do.
Okay, tell me about that. Because, you may or may not know this about me, but I'm a huge fan of the Piper Cherokee series. So
I love them. So I trained, initially I trained on the 150s when I first learned to fly. And as soon as I could, I started to fly the PA-28.
right, because you realized that the low wing was the better wing, right?
I realised that I
Could
could
land in corn better.
I realised I could land.
Okay.
I realised I could land a PA-28 and it would be a bit more forgiving because it had got the springy oleo wheels. So I was like, so when I figured out that it could actually make my landings look okay, then that's...
Yeah.
But yeah, now I fly the PA-28 Warrior, and
Yes.
there's two of those, the 161s, and then I fly the Arrow as well. So I've
Okay,
just
yeah, see?
recently started flying the Arrow.
I'm just saying, the preferred airplane of famous
The UK?
YouTubers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've noticed on the videos that you're recording as you go through security, you're going through your tickets and getting on. Do they let you are you wearing a camera? Do you ever get in trouble?
I've got in trouble before, and that's why a lot of the time I don't film a lot of the process now because it's not good. So I have on my backpack I have a little GoPro clipped onto here, which fits in quite well, and most people don't tend to notice it. And I don't like to record people without them
Permission, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't record through security. There was a time when I kind of did a little bit, and then one time I got in an absolute ton of trouble, and I nearly got denied boarding for my flight as a result. There's a whole story about that, but and at that point I was like, this isn't people who watch the videos don't care if I don't film through security. They don't know what airport security's like. So I tend to just these days. I film when I get on the plane and I film when I get off the plane, and that's pretty much the only time that I use this one on here because it allows me to just board the plane and get that shot without having to actually wave a camera in people's faces all the time. It just kind of sits there and does its job. And then we blur out faces a lot of the time, especially if I'm being critical of the airline, because at the end of the day, the crew are doing the best, and it doesn't matter. The experience might have been terrible with the airline, but the crew are doing the best they can. It's not their fault. So I tend to, if I do catch them on a bad day, I'll blur them out. And obviously, I've had occasions where people have come to me afterwards and said, I'm on that video, but any chance you could just blur my face out? And it's like, absolutely, because...
After you've posted?
Yeah. So, you don't always know. A lot of people are really happy. Most of the time, the crew are absolutely fine with it, and they don't mind being famous on YouTube. And I've had a lot of people who I've flown with, and they've gone, "Oh yeah, I was in your video, and I loved it, and I've shown all my friends that I was in your video," and they absolutely love it. You see, so it's just about being sensitive, I think, to what people want, and just trying not to be an idiot about it.
Yeah, well, that's very nice of you. If you're ever on one of my flights, just let me know.
Absolutely. Especially if you're going to that regional Americana, you'd probably go there on American Eagle. So
there we go. So just make sure you do your makeup before I get on the plane, and we've sorted.
Well, you make sure you do your makeup like you did here.
Yes, of course, yes.
Okay, last question. Do you find that you get recognized a lot now as you travel on the airlines, and do you get sometimes preferred seating or complimentary upgrades and things
Favorable
like that?
treatment.
Yes.
Favorable treatment. Well, you know what? I get recognised quite a bit these days. Probably at least once every trip I will get recognised. And it's the weirdest thing as well, because I will be walking around my town back in the UK. I'll go shopping, I'll go out, and I do various things, and I'm just another person. The second
You're
I
not Bob and Carol.
No, I'm not Bob and Carol.
Right. Yeah.
And I will go and meet all the people named Bob and Carol in the supermarket, and nobody will ever even realise that I've got a bit of a following online. I step into an airport and I can guarantee that within 10 minutes somebody will go, "Oh my goodness, it's Noel Phillips, I watch all of your videos." I'd be like, "Okay, it's a bit awkward," but but yeah, in answer to your question about getting preferential treatment, normally I'd say no. I do kind of get a lot of people go, "Oh, if there's anything we can do to help," or I get the purser come up and just
someone. Oh, we just had an extra cup of champagne,
But the funny you should mention it, because yesterday, literally on my flight here yesterday, the backstory to this is I did a video on a essential air service carrier here called Boutique Air, who operate the PC-12s. And
oh, nice.
I love them. They're just so awesome to fly on. They fly to these really cool, out-of-the-way places that you'd never get standard commercial service to. And the last video I did with them, we had a flaps failure after we took off, and we had to divert back to Atlanta, which was fine. And the crew, again, were amazing. They did a brilliant job with it. The ground crew did everything they could. And the customer service I got afterwards was kind of awful, if I'm honest. And what had essentially happened is they'd rescheduled the flight to like 4 a.m. the following morning and not told anybody. They told us it was cancelled, and then it turned out it wasn't. So we can't give you a refund because the flight's gone anyway. So even though it was a bit like that. And I made a video saying I wasn't really impressed with the customer service. This wasn't very good. You can't really do that to a customer. And yesterday I flew on Boutique Air, and I flew from, where did I fly from? From Albuquerque to Dallas-Fort Worth. And I get to the airport yesterday morning, and I go to check in, and the guy there is like, "Oh, I've seen your video on Boutique Air, I love it." I'm like, "Oh, goodness. Here we go.
No.
What's going to happen here?" So, yeah.
We got a seat in the back. It's got a laboratory signal on it, but don't worry about it.
And then the plane lands, and the captain gets off the plane, and he comes and he's like, "Oh, I've seen your video on Boutique Air." I was like, "Oh, this is only going one way."
All right.
But he said to me, like, "We've had to leave the first officer back in Carlsbad for weight and balance reasons, so because they were full up effectively. So would you like to come sit up in the front with me?" I was like, "Well, seeing as you're asking, yeah, I don't mind. I'll take that seat for a flight." And we were chatting through the flight anyway. It was an absolutely
Was he doing
incredible
Spotify and
flight.
WhatsApp?
He wasn't, funnily enough. No. I did ask him
And
if
your
he wanted
VOR,
to.
was it spinning?
Only when we went round in circles. But, but we were chatting about it, and he was like, "You know what? he used to be a customer service agent for Boutique Air, so he was kind of saw the video and was a bit upset about how we'd been treated as well. So it was nice, and they're a good airline, and that's what I've been trying to say in the videos. I love it. I love flying with them because the crew are always amazing. The ground staff are always amazing. The aircraft are cool. They go to some amazing places. It's just when you have to get in touch with them about something. But they really pushed the boat out yesterday, and I wouldn't have got to sit in the first officer's seat, I don't think, had I not done that video, which it doesn't make me 100% comfortable with it because I don't like to get preferential treatment, but equally it's quite nice, isn't it?
If they would move me up to that seat, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Oh,
I get moved up to that seat all the time. I don't know. It's weird.
Okay, so if people want to see your videos, you've got 2 channels now. You've got Noel Phillips,
Yep.
and then the pilot channel.
Yeah, Noel Phillips Pilot Vlogs
Okay.
on YouTube.
So we'll put a link in the description for that, and we'll put it down here in the lower third. So you know what? Thank you so much for crossing the pond to come and join us, and it's a pleasure meeting you. Now, one thing. We are going to cross the pond back and spend a little bit of time in your country, in UK. We're going with FlyingEyes, which, by the way, we are FlyingEyes brothers, if you notice, everybody. They've got the new ophthalmics, and you've got the other version that I have. Anyway, we're planning on going with FlyingEyes over to the UK to shoot a series of taking off videos this spring. So it'll be a lot of fun, and we'll get together with you.
Absolutely, you've been more than welcome.
All right. So, as always, you guys, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe. Go to his channel, like and subscribe, both of them. And we'll see you next time.
In the hangar.